So with our Y screening that we really see generate maybe more, what happens if there isn't a hit with the DNA? You don't find it.
So sometimes when a profile is generated, it's not eligible for CODIS entry. There's specific standards that each profile has to meet in order to be entered into the database. In that event, if we don't have a CODIS eligible profile, we will go back and look at the data. There's also testing called Y-STR testing that's specifically developing a profile from the Y chromosome, and we can look at doing that type of testing. If a profile is eligible for CODIS, we enter it into CODIS, and not every profile gets a hit. Sometimes they sit in the database for several years if they get a hit or if ever.
So everyone's probably very familiar with the issue of the backlog kits across the nation. And can you talk a little bit about what we've done in Idaho with our backlog kits, what that looked like?
Yes. So in 2016, when all law enforcement agencies were required to do an inventory of all the kits they had in their custody at that time, and then to determine whether or not those kits had already been tested by the lab, we were expecting about 400 kits. There were significantly more than that. They were submitted to the laboratory. We also had some kits that went to the FBI as part of a program they were running at that time. We didn't have the capacity to handle that number of kits all at once, so we had to prioritize. We opted to prioritize the current kits, the current cases coming in the door that were actively being prosecuted, that were a pending public safety issue potentially. The previously unsubmitted kits, which is what we referred to all those kits that were discovered on the inventories, are ones that for the most part had been adjudicated, meaning they'd already made it through the criminal justice system and there wasn't a pending need for those. In the meantime, as a laboratory, we had to figure out how are we going to be able to do all these kits and come up with the capacity for handling those. So our DNA unit underwent a Lean Six Sigma project. If you're not familiar with that, it's looking at every aspect of your process, every minute step in your process to determine what's necessary, what's unnecessary, what could be streamlined. And they completely changed the processing of the kits. The Y screen that I mentioned earlier was part of that. They also moved to a batch processing mode. Before, one analyst would perform every single step of a case start to finish, and you can only work about 3 to 5 cases doing that. Now cases are worked as a batch, and we can do an entire plate of samples, around 80 samples in one batch. So it allowed us to be much more efficient. We also looked to using grant funding to hire some additional employees in order to process these previously unsubmitted kits. And we are now at a point where we are putting those cases out the door and getting them completed on a daily basis. If a profile is entered and we later find out that was the victim's consensual partner, we then have to go through a process to pull that out. If we get a hit in the DNA database, you would think it's just oh, here's the name, but no, it's actually quite a complex process. So if we obtain a hit, the laboratory that holds that offender sample has to pull that sample, verify the thumbprint that's on the sample, and then they actually have to rerun it, completely rerun it, generate the profile a second time to ensure that the correct profile was uploaded. Only then will the name be released. The laboratory that put that evidence profile in then has to issue a report to the law enforcement agency. And because those offender samples don't have a chain of custody, the law enforcement agency then has to get a sample from that offender. So in order to save that entire process, if we can get that sample up front, it eliminates the need for that entire process, which saves laboratory resources for testing the kits that are coming in the door.
A lot of work and a lot of data.
Yes.
How do you handle all that data?
The laboratory uses different software programs for data interpretation. For our statistics program, We use a probabilistic genotyping software. Idaho was actually the 6th laboratory in the nation to go online with this program. It's called STR Mix, and we went online with that in December of 2015.
Idaho now has a law, as many states do, that the kits must have some mechanism to track for the victim and for everyone involved. Can you talk about how Idaho is doing that?
Yes, Idaho has what is known as the Idaho Sexual Assault Kit Tracking System. We call it IKITS. In 2016, when Idaho was looking at how many kits do we have out there, how many kits have been tested, and we didn't have the answers to those questions. So our internal programmers here at the Idaho State Police developed IKITS. It allows every individual stakeholder within the process to be able to track the status of a kit. A victim can track the status of his or her kit. The law enforcement, the medical community, the laboratory, and the prosecutor's offices. Those individuals actually have a login where they can go and enter specific information and document where the kits are at in the process. And the victim can go to the website. They're provided their kit number at the time of kit collection, and they can enter that kit number into the program, kind of like UPS tracking. You enter your tracking number and it will tell you where that kit is at. That allows them to see the progress of the kit, to know if it's been sent to the lab, to know if testing's being performed, to know if a profile went into CODIS, if there was a CODIS hit. It just gives them a lot more visibility on what's going on with their kit and to know that it is being tested.
And I understand that our analysts were very careful to make sure that there was no patient information put into this system. So if a hacker got in there, this patient can be assured that her personal information is totally confidential.
That is correct. The only patient information that goes into the system is whether or not the person wished to be named to law enforcement or had the kit collected anonymously. And the name is not entered, it just is a button that says named or anonymous. There is no other patient information associated with the IKIT system.
And one thing, as a sexual assault nurse examiner myself, that I appreciate in using the system is the end user ease. As a nurse, I don't spend a lot of time in front of a computer, and I can just go in and click a button here and click a button here, and probably 6 or 7 clicks, and I've done everything I need to do in the system. I've met the Idaho law. Since ISP has created the IKIT system, where is that going?
Since ISP created it internally using our programmers here on site, we decided to offer that program to other states, cities, county labs that were in need of a tracking system as well, and maybe didn't have the funding or the talented programmers like ISP had. Offer it to those states. It has been put into use by several states. Off the top of my head, I can think of North Carolina is using our software, Puerto Rico is using our software, and we've had inquiries from many dozens of city, county, and federal laboratories that are interested in our IKIT software, which we provide to them at no cost.
And so the only thing that we require of them is that they in turn not charge anyone else, correct?
Correct, and we don't offer any support for the software. They would be responsible for making any changes to it that would be unique to their state or county, and then doing the support and follow up on that. But we do offer them the program and all of the data underlying that program.
Excellent. Thank you so much. With that, we're going to transition back to another round of discussion. Matthew?
Thanks, Tyler. We're going to toss it, I think, first to Rylene. We've got her live now. And Rylene, we're talking a lot about laboratory testing and CODIS and all of these kind of things. There was a question that came in from Melissa. She wanted to know about DNA testing and leaving evidence for defense testing or for other types of analysis. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so when I say we test every swab, we're testing a portion of every swab. Our laboratory has a policy, it's written into our procedures that we need to retain half of the evidence if possible for future retesting, be that defense, be it new technology coming down the line. And if a sample has to be consumed, we have a procedure that we go through. We notify the prosecuting attorney and request that they notify defense, and that they discuss and determine if it has to be consumed, if they're comfortable with the state lab consuming it, or if they want to seek private testing or to not have the sample tested at all. But we do have a policy in place for maintaining half the sample when possible.
Riley, one of the things I know we've talked about in our management meetings is talking about this concept and this policy that we have about testing all of the evidence that's in the kit and allowing us to really say from a DNA perspective, we've done what we can do with these kits and not coming back to them at some future time. Tell us a little bit more about that from your perspective and what that means for the DNA lab.
For the DNA lab, again, it means we try to maintain half the evidence if possible. We need to use enough sample to generate a profile if we can, but we very strongly advocate not unnecessarily utilizing sample. So for example, some screening tests that aren't necessary because our DNA testing is human specific, we've eliminated those for most cases. Some of our male kits, for example, where we cannot do that Y-screen process because the victim is gender assigned at birth male, we don't screen those. We just send them straight forward to DNA because we want to retain as much sample as possible to get to those probative types of analyses.
One of the things I know your team is working on is molecular genealogy. Tell us what you're doing with that, how that fits into this.
So for molecular genealogy, we did develop a team, again, with an interdisciplinary approach. We have not just lab members on that team. We went through our CODIS administrator, did a phenomenal amount of work going through every sample that's we had in CODIS that was from a violent crime, a violent crime against person, a sexual assault or homicide, and looking at which ones were in there and did not have a hit. Then went back and she looked at the case files to determine if there was any evidence left over, how much DNA was present in that sample so that we could identify the ones that would be most suitable for DNA. The team then went through a lot of processes. We developed an MOU for agencies to sign. We obtained some grant funding, which we had a little bit of an issue with that, but we're seeking other avenues for getting that testing funded. Sought out a laboratory that could assist us with doing that, but a lot of work by our CODIS admin and her team in looking for all those samples that were still sitting in the database with no answers.
That's exciting to us. Obviously, we're going to solve a lot of cold cases, and it's going to be neat to watch that process happen. I want to bring in a couple of our other team members that have been able to join us now. Emily, we're going to throw a question to you. Emily Mangus has been able to join us. She was up late helping a survivor last night, we understand. And so we let her sleep a little bit this morning, but we appreciate her being with us now. Emily, can you talk to us a little bit more about a question coming in from Nancy about sex trafficking survivors?
Sure. Sex trafficking is kind of difficult. It's an area that the victims don't feel as if they're victims. And so a lot of times they don't come forward as victims, or they're scared, and it takes a lot of interaction. I believe the latest research says 7 interactions with medical care before they're willing to consider leaving their situation. So it's hard. We feel like we can't help these people, or we're putting them right back in the situation that they came out of. But realize that your interaction that you just had with them is one of 7. They're now one interaction closer to hopefully leaving that situation. If we're talking about identifying, we may be looking at an individual who has another person with them that's extremely overbearing. They want to answer all the questions for the patient that's in front of you. They may show that they are in possession of the person in front of you. And then, of course, we're always looking for things like tattoos or branding that are specific to trafficking. And unfortunately, they're everyday symbols that we may see. A lot of the queen symbols from the cards, so the Q, or a crown, a B, a backwards $sign, a rose, are kind of the things that we look for in tattooing that the patient doesn't necessarily want to talk about. If it's something that they've got a story behind, it's less likely to be related to trafficking. But it's the markings that they don't want to talk to us about that kind of spark my interest and get me thinking that I may have a victim of trafficking in front of me.
Thanks, Emily. Very important considerations. Last question, I think, for this section. Back to Rylene. Rylene, a question coming in from Allison about average turnaround time for sexual assault and sexual assault cases being worked in the laboratory. And do we have different turnaround times for accused versus non-accused cases?
Well, that's a really good question. Our DNA section took an approach to that by, because we have essentially a test all, even kits where prosecution has been declined or the victim has indicated they do not want to proceed still have to be tested. So our laboratory will queue those up differently when they come in. Anything that is not moving forward in the criminal justice system, we will set as a lower priority. And anything that is actively being investigated, we will set as a normal priority case. We will also do rush cases if there's a jury trial date, if there is a threat to public safety that the agency has notified us. We really need answers on this because we feel there's a threat to the community. We will rush those. Our goal is a 90-day turnaround time for that first or for the whole process. Right now, we're setting smaller goals until we can get there. We're making huge amounts of progress, especially within the last 6 months. We've really reduced our backlogs. But our ultimate goal is a 90-day turnaround time for all kits. I would say we're meeting that for those normal priority kits, the ones that are actively being investigated. And we're a little bit longer on those that we've determined are a lower priority based on the information coming into us.
And we do report those numbers on our website, on our public website. We're in a little bit of a quandary right now about how to report those numbers because we are resolving so many of those older cases that have come into the laboratory. So those numbers aren't exactly accurate or reflective of what's happening. So we will get those numbers updated on the website soon. I want to toss it now, I believe, to Tyler. We're going to do a poll question.
That we are. All right, everybody. The fourth question of the day should be popping up on your screen now. The question is, if not anonymous, how long does your state mandate sexual assault kits must be stored? If for some reason your answer does not fit into one of these categories, try and select the one that's closest to your state. But once again, it is how long does your state mandate sexual assault kits must be stored? They're coming in right now. It's actually a pretty even split as I'm watching all of this unfold. We have a decent amount of people who aren't sure what their state mandate is. Other than that, it's pretty even across the board, with the exception of forever being the second highest category. We're at about 52 participation rate, 52%. So as the other people kind of funnel in, I'll keep you updated.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And maybe a little bit of research to be done by some of our participants on what their state law or local law is related to sexual assault kit retention, and maybe some work actually with their legislatures. So
and that's kind of how we started. Is a question was asked, and from there we kept moving.
I think we're up to the next video.